Good morning. It is September 29th at 11:37. Where to begin? I posted one of my video journals to Facebook. I created the video without intention to do so, but after watching it I realized that it might be helpful to some of my colleagues and just provide a different outlook, and when I watched it, it made me laugh, so I figured I'd share it. Mostly positive remarks. However, there was a question as to whether seeing a counselor that has not just different views than me, but very oppressive views, maybe detrimental to my social justice activism. This is kind of a claim. My cat's meowing. No, monkey, I'm busy. This is something that I take seriously. As someone who seeks growth and self-reflection and that kind of stuff, I want to be open to when I am critiqued. As a ally, I think it's really important to be aware that I may act in ways that I don't automatically see as problematic. So I think it's important when you have people questioning your actions in this way, it's important to unpack it a bit and see where that's coming from. Originally, I wasn't worried because when I first saw those comments, I was like, well, I've done nothing wrong. Like, I'm seeing a counselor. Like, I need to see a counselor. And for people who know me well, know that I've been looking for a counselor for a very long time. And that I haven't been able to afford to actually spend money on one. So I've been on wait lists and trying to get in with mental health, but the problem with that is that my mental health isn't severe enough. So we have this problem where people with mental health issues that can progress into something more severe are being turned away simply because the resources aren't adequate enough to help everyone. So I think what happens oftentimes is people get to a point where their mental health gets a lot worse than it had to, and then whereas it could have been prevented, people can have really hard times in that sense. And that's something I've been kind of worried about because, I've been struggling with mental health for a while, and I'll be open and honest about that. I'm privileged enough to be educated in psychology and to know when there's problems and where a lot of the problems lie. However, people still need connections with others. You can't just know all of this theory and expect to fix yourself. You need to develop a relationship with someone that you trust. And like my good friend Kimmy said, it's about that very vulnerable connection you have with someone where your voice is heard. It's a lot about witnessing, having someone witness your stories, and I think it's really important. That being said, I know there's also a concern that seeing a counselor who is racist and sexist, like most of us are, if not all of us are, we're raised in a society that is racist and sexist, so we cannot expect that a single one of us who are in privileged groups aren't going to be racist or sexist. That's just the way it is. There are going to be people who are a lot more racist and sexist, and potentially could have a more negative impact on the world around them. And so that's kind of like where this guy stands, is he's in a power, or in a position of power and authority, and people trust what he has to say. And so for him to be saying these things is really problematic. I got this really awesome coffee cup yesterday from my good friend Nick. It's a Totoro. Super cute. So the other concern is that somebody who's in that position of power could cause harm, could easily cause harm. So, I could say as much as I want that I have a thick skin, and that, him saying all this stuff isn't going to get to me, and I'll just call him out on it, which I have been. But, in a sense, like, especially the sexism, because that's what directly impacts me. As a white person, I think the concern is just that potentially I could, I don't know, listen to his racism and become more racist. To me, that's not an issue at all. And I think to most people who know me, it's not an issue. I grew up in a fundamentalist Christian family, and oftentimes you find in those families racism, sexism, whatever. And to this day, like, I've encountered this in my entire life, and it still hasn't made me more racist. In fact, it's probably made me less racist and sexist, because I've resisted against those things my entire life since a small child. It caused me trouble growing up, but at the same time, it made me who I am. And I think for anyone to say, don't see a counselor because he's racist and sexist, and you might become a racist and sexist, I think isn't really honoring who I am. And I don't think, like, I think as, like, within our friendships, when we have reason for concern, it's important for us to voice our concerns. But at the same time, we need to be able to trust that our friends know how to handle themselves. We can't assume that they're going to put themselves in a situation and all of their, character strengths are going to crash and burn. Because it's like, no, like, who I am as a person is to resist against the status quo, to resist against systemic oppression. And for someone to think that going to a counselor is going to change that, I don't think that's being very fair. That being said, the more I think about this, I'll be honest, the more concerned I become, because I wonder if our sessions are going to consist of me calling him out on things, and we're not going to get very far. The other thing I wanted to mention was that these things that he was saying weren't related, really, to the conversation at hand. And I think that was really problematic in the sense that a counselor shouldn't be going off in tangents, especially because, like, he was making statements about certain things with, I think, under the impression that I was on the same page as him. Like, he must get a lot of other clients who come in are like, oh yeah, those Islams, oh yeah, like, all women, are this way, and this is all they want, and, that's all we have to worry about, and blah, blah, blah. So I'm sure he gets people who are like, oh yeah, like, totally buy it, but, obviously I didn't, and so that is one problem that I foresee, is that he's making a lot of assumptions. He never once expected me to incorporate any of these beliefs into my counseling. However, it was more like he was coming up with examples of certain things and bringing up like examples of clients that he's had were people with these beliefs, and then kind of shutting them down, which I thought was really problematic. Because, I mean, what if he gets a fucking Muslim client? Like, then what are you going to do? Are you going to shut down the religion? Like, piece of crap. Anyway, so yeah, like, this is a lot to think about, and I'm not going to, you know, just overlook these kinds of comments when I find it's really important what other people have to say about these things, because I'm only one person, and I'm only one brain and one set of eyes. And, but at the same time, I think when we talk about my social justice activism and the very act of receiving services from someone who is racist and sexist, does it impact, by principle, my activism? And I've been thinking about it. I've been thinking about examples where that would be true. Like, say, for example, I started dating someone, and they're, you know, significantly more racist and sexist than all people who are white and whatever. I know people will highly disagree with me on this, but people who, like, I want to say in my opinion, but I'm really strong about it, so I don't even want to say that. But, like, white people are raised in a way that they benefit from the oppression of people of color. And therefore, all white people are missing a very important perspective that they can't gain from experience by nature of their whiteness, and are raised by a society that devalues and benefits off the oppression of others. So we're all a little bit racist. But going back to the fact that this guy's more racist than most, yeah, say I started dating someone who was more racist than most, that would be problematic. That would be problematic because I choose to spend my time with someone on a personal level. And when you spend time with someone on a personal level, the purpose of that is to connect and to grow, and that would be detrimental to connect in that way with someone who has such different views. And it's not just views, because racism isn't an opinion. Racism is a choice that we make constantly. And so that would be a problem. It's interesting because I've had friends who say racist and oppressive things, but only very few people have called me out on that, because I think it's really hard for people who live in privileged positions to realize that part of being a good ally is making sacrifices, and making sacrifices for the better of your activism. And a lot of that has to do with calling out people in your circle who are saying oppressive or doing oppressive things or holding oppressive attitudes, and calling them out and continuing to do so. But very few people have called me out on that. One of my good long-distance friends, she taught me that lesson a while ago, and it was a really hard lesson. I resisted at first. I thought I was okay by having friends that, you know, have misguided, very racist beliefs. And not very racist, oppressive beliefs. I can't remember exactly what it was about, but one of my friends commented something about Bill Carson. That's what it was. Bill Carson said, like, related abortion to slavery. and he's a black man. So messed up. So anyway, one of my friends at the time, like association, he wasn't really a friend, said, oh yeah, this guy is like, he's following Jesus and blah blah blah. And at the time I was like, well, he's obviously just misguided, he's not racist. But then I read it over and over again, and I was like, no, this is messed up. Like, if you're reading this and you're agreeing with this, like, you need to really think this shit through. So, after getting reamed out really bad, and feeling really defensive and all that, I spent a lot of time thinking about it and realized that I really need to make a better or a stronger stand in my life against these kind of things. And if I have people that refuse to to see the harm in their ways, that eventually I just need to cut ties with them. And that's a really, really hard thing to chew. But like I said, I spent a lot of time thinking about it, and now I see the value in it, because people aren't going to change their ways unless society makes it difficult for them to be oppressive. And that's why, as individuals, we need to be willing, excuse me, we need to be willing to make those sacrifices. Because people of color and marginalized groups are making sacrifices every day, moment to moment, so that white people can live more fruitfully. So that's the way that is. So back to the counselor guy. I'm still like trying to find reasons in my mind why it would go against my activism. If I sat there and allowed him to say those things and act as if I was okay with that, that would be problematic. I think it's my duty, especially as someone in a master's counseling master's program for counseling. I think it's definitely my responsibility to speak up when he says stuff like that, and I'm going to continue to do that. So in a way, I see this as an opportunity to exercise my activism. So to me, that's positive. And then I also think about one thing that crossed my mind is, what if this, because to me this argument seems by principle. It doesn't seem like it's saying I'm going to become racist or I am condoning racism by seeing a racist counselor. It seems to me like it's more like a by principle argument. If you are seeing this guy, you're condoning his beliefs, and I have a really hard time seeing that, because what if someone is in a situation, like, say, for instance, in our town, Chilliwack, there's no doctors taking in patients. And so say the only doctor you have access to is a doctor that has racist beliefs. And you have, like, maybe not life-threatening conditions, but stuff that really impedes your functioning, and can lead to life-threatening issues. Do you stop seeing the doctor and just not see any doctor? And let your health decline and put yourself at an immense risk because he holds racist beliefs. When we're talking about things by principle, I would hope that we would also take into account the person's physical and mental health. I don't think we take mental health seriously enough. And I think as people who make goals to be humanitarian and to work in human services and to be activists and to be allies, we still have to take care of number one first. We cannot pour from an empty cup. And when we expect someone to be a good ally, we also have to support their self-care. And if that means seeing a counselor that I disagree with on a lot of things, but it might help my mental health so that I can help others, then I don't see a problem with that. But I want to hear your thoughts, so please comment below and let me know what you think.